keep forgetting that desktop Gmail doesn't work with the Emory Wi-Fi.
Alright, I got the email.
I did as well.
Me too. The email.
Downloading. What's that? His engineering. You could just keep that in numbers. Who knows when it'll stop?
And the financing policy is like 2024.
I'm ready.
So ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Ethics requires between others as ends in themselves. One, the existence of extreme goodness requires unconditionally towards course guard. One, when rational being undertaken action here is the species of the arc to be good, there must be some kind of unconditionally good and so conservative condition of the goodness cannot be known to be inclination for the inclination.
Louder.
Did not exist their object be without worth. The unconditionally valuable thing must be humanity regarding your existence and irrational against an end in themselves. Subjective principle of human action we must regard ourselves capable of conferring value, regard others also and themselves impacts. They all affirm school act, non-content theory, source obligation, and assumes the good option that presupposes the goodness of rational will be necessity. My firm is inherent for the way we set ends up. It must be necessary, not contingent, since otherwise it's claimed to be a scalable necessity. How is a necessary truth that way? Probability of necessary truth is possible. That means it's true in a possible world that implies it's true in all worlds without necessity is two practical identities such as debater require that we value humanity. Course guard 2. To reflect the structure of life for the type of conception of ourselves when you deliberate if there is something over desires the issues which desire to act on the law of determined actions is that one regardless of being respectful of yourself conception one's identity is a description under which you value yourself under which you find your action to do saying I call it practical identity complex a matter your reason express your identity your obligation for what identity purpose 3 treating oneself as a mere means distorted morality makes ethics incoherent con one a human cannot renounce her personality is a contradiction that she should be authorized to act as if no authorization were needed to annihilate the subject morality to root out these moralities oneself as a mere means to base humanity. Next, punishment must never be justified purely on the grounds of higher ends. That treats individuals as a mere means. Instead, punishment must be truly justified by and proportional to the crime itself. Con 2. Punishment can never be inflicted merely as a means to promote some other good. It must always be inflicted only because she has committed a crime. A human can never be treated merely as a means. Only the law of retribution can specify punishment. All other principles of fluctuating on super percentage of strictness because the training conditions are makes it a final close for a liberal and never relation to the offense for someone. While the outrage done to someone's all love, honor, can be quite similar to the hurt done to propriety. But apologize publicly. This outweighs on active to the city, even if some other theory is generally true. Only my firm says the obligations of the CJS specifically standard is consistent with this historical punishment. To clarify, one intents are relevant. The firm merely considers out of my actions rather than the inner maxim that agents pursue. Someone who tortures for a good cause does not deserve any punishment at a lesser punishment than one who tortures for its own sake. Two consequences are irrelevant. Punishments can only ever be justified by the action itself, not by any consequences of it. That treats humans as means it is wrong to frame it in this regardless of whether it would deter people from crime and induction fails to be predict future events based on punishment. That triggers the idea that punishment will repeat themselves itself relies without trying to continue. The role of the judge and ballot is to assess the truth and falsity of the resolution vote after the true and negative for this one for the constituent rules of the finding this also alternate model of debate there's some people debate that's relevant to the judge's adjudication of the round relative that the judges decide based on the system of rules of their committed action like truth that's constitutive of LD grants one there for features that are constitutive of LD a resolution of the negative first truth that's included with the resolution but the rules that grants for the adjudication of truth and falsity can judges in education regard the resolution as a heavily held not including features second affirmative group to prove true and negate to deny the truth of it deny burdens of it or the end around everything shows clearly these rules are unique to LD probably use the PM and all these rules are divorced from the debaters act which were given proposition after the topic is contested with formally not mechanism these restrictions are given for one of our restrictions to define our activity of the role of the judge being educated but until the rules are changed externally that is relevant to judge the judge in round 2 truth testing is a pedagogically valuable branch 2 each practice can provide unique skills of the rules of that practice no activity with rules for education will be true that education because the rules generally enough that it feels to be beneficial to practical value than rather the rules will fall in arbitrary truth testing allows you to analyze arguments from a wide range of views and methods along with testing the worth of every argument developed the skills are garnered in debate or rather from the process of debating now the content of the argument to learn how to justify beliefs and become good actors and always breaking this paradigm by Brian Berry to embrace get through political ground concerning the debate to the rest of the truth testing for the stabilities work for argumentation which can be prepped and informed must give fairness otherwise one side will be way more important on an issue than holds when contention 1 charge party left wrongdoers off too easily they should be punished according to their desert left you 1 retributive justice demands that offenders be charged for all of the crimes that they have committed otherwise individuals will not be punished for all the crimes for which they deserve to be punished prosecutors should not agree to drop charges if they believe that a credible case is against defendants if they are allowed to do so they are not really tempted to punish the guilty for all their offenses 2 charge and sentence bargaining under my proportionality for crimes of P2 charge bargaining may produce outcomes where defendants plead guilty in exchange for promises from prosecutors to drop all their charges they are maybe poorly represented by defense attorneys that the prosecutor managed to convince them that they will be found to be more serious charges if they do not plead a lesser one sentence bargaining may lead defendants to plead guilty defendants who negotiate plead receive sentences that are far from 25 to 75% larger the kind of disparity they'll plead but you'll likely to see those a lot of sentencing range to defendants with the same offense may receive a vast difference for different sentences scientific studies prove the innocent will plead guilty German 1913 this study is sought to recruit the innocent defendants in a real manner responsible representing truthful to students and asking them to make a decision they continue well over half the innocent study but if they're willing to falsely admit guilt in return for reduced punishment the study participants are placed in a real bargaining situation representing with information about their statistical probability just during a real plea bargaining negotiation innocent individuals are highly reverse 3 plea bargaining makes punishment contingent on arbitrary factors like the skill of the prosecutor rather than culpability lefty 3 given that time may produce a range of harm negotiated pleas the police seem unlikely to yield sentences related to such practice they are more likely to reflect such things as the defendant to make the other defense defendants are free on bail or not a prosecutor's perception of the strength of the case or applicable for the securing of a conviction under these factors should if we're concerned with fully determined consensus under view 1, the externality and theory on the advocacy and interest of the education still will be able to avoid theory of questions which is debated with the topic of the political will be usually exclusive interest of course taking stance, but if I have no idea which you prefer, I just do so arbitrarily. So you should be two prefer additionally, even if the justification of punishment is utilitarian, the application to be retributive rules. One must distinguish between justifying necessary rules and justifying operating action. None of these really utilitarian arguments are equivalent with regard to questions about practices which retributive. The argument with the application of particular rules in particular cases. The judge and legislator look in different directions. One is past one. The few justification of what the judge does sounds justification of the legislator sounds utilitarian. Once the legislator decides to assign penalties and institution is set up with it will involve a retributive conception. It is part of a criminal law that application should be justified by arguments of retributive character. No official shall have discretionary power to inflict penalties. Whatever he thinks is for the benefit of society. On utilitarian grounds, such power cannot be justified. 3. Kantianism is key to all the question far. Some feminists find that abstract rational beings are problematic because rationality is white male and European. I find this interpretation puzzling. Find it first, abstraction may be understood as a demand for intersubject treaty. Second, may be understood as an attempt to avoid ethical egoism. Abstraction demands that in the midst of our concrete differences, we recognize ourselves in the other and the other themselves to avoid egoism. One must abstract for personal interest. The merit of the category imperative for philosophy is that country is ideology that is based on the use of that means joining the constitutional will be able to see between wrong theories and feelings. Although his own has its own problems, it would be equally probably direct the category imperative without first responding to demands for protection. Potential for the problem cannot be abstract universal. No use in the objective benefit of your impact and even the offer of legitimacy of the acquisition of your laptop proves abstract ideas are inevitable, so try to make them as best as possible. Having all this outweighs positive ethical theory from the nature of all not moral Phil Wood. Kantian principles are not favorable to are not favorable to these principles are liable to rhetorical views. The thought that they have this point has any philosophical significance rests on an error. Some things that they're you can cut the card error.
Wait, where?
Error. Error.
Oh. Is that the wood card?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Alright. You ready for cross-ex?
Yeah.
Let's go through the framework. You established that people should be treated as not as means to an end, as a sort of interpersonal relationship between people. Where is a Kant card about the government?
What do you mean?
Any Kant card about the government.
That's
Any
not,
Kant justification
like the framework deals with
talks
moral
about the
obligation.
state. Yeah.
I mean,
Kant's
obviously the question of retributive punishment has to do with the government itself.
Okay, so why is so is this sort of like the omnilateral will justification that the government is the arbiter of justice between two agents?
This is not an omnilateral will framework.
So what does it say?
The entire framework.
So what is the internal link between humans sort of being ends in themselves?
So the argument is that punishment can never be justified in some sort of higher end because that would treat individuals as a means to an end. So the application of punishment has to be retributive or
proportional to what the crime is. What makes up a crime? What's a crime?
Something that is
violates the laws of the omnilateral will of the government that you're participating in.
Yeah.
Do you defend the resolution, right? Like the government abolishes the Okay. So if the government constitutes crimes and punishment always is proportional to those crimes, does everyone in jail right now for weed deserve to be there?
What do you mean?
If the previous two claims are true, that punishment must always be proportional to the crime, and that the government constitutes what crimes are, is everyone in jail for marijuana right now?
Wait, obviously it doesn't say that. Obviously, it doesn't say that like right now the government has applied punishment retributively in every instance.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, if laws say that this is the universal punishment that is mandated, then why does your framework not support that?
I don't like. Can you re-explain the question?
Sure. Your framework says that punishment must always be proportional to the crime.
Yeah.
That punishment is determined by the crime, the laws that say what that punishment is. If that is the case, why does that mean that everyone in jail for weed right now should be there?
I mean, not necessarily. There might not be a retributive reason for why they should be there now.
What do you mean by that? If they were punished with the mandatory minimum that is currently part of law, should they be there?
I mean, obviously, these instances have already happened. It's a question of how punishment is applied.
I'm not asking about the SQO or in a disad sense. I'm asking about what your framework justifies.
I mean, probably that would be bad.
Why?
What do you mean?
Why would that be bad?
I mean, you have to prove that it's not a proportional punishment.
So, yeah, but what determines that proportionality is the omnilateral will of the state, which is your framework one.
Wait, no,
I guess I'll move on. The role of the ballot stuff, truth testing. What happens underneath the truth testing role of the ballot if one debater is incredibly racist?
What do you mean?
What happens? Do they win if they win the truth of the F side? What happens? If one debater chooses to
I mean, there might be certain independent voters that operate external.
Oh, that's helpful. I'll email it out. 2-off case. It's just one off, but there's a framework page, which would be helpful to close a separate off.
So
Yeah. And then the aff, it'll be the underview, and then truth testing, the framework, contention.
In terms of your two offs, are you starting with the framework or the not framework?
The not framework.
Okay.
Let me open that. It is done.
It's about to be. It's just like uploading. Alright, sent.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Everybody else good?
Oh, one second. No, sorry.
Alright.
Wait, so can you just say the order on the case again?
Yeah, underview, truth testing, framework, contention. Alright. Black life is shaped in the rippling wake of slavery. The foundational violence instigated the Middle Passage surges forward throughout time, replicating itself. The fungibility and gratuitous violence of black bodies are marked for cannot be resisted with the realm of exclusion. Sharp 16. To be in the wake is to occupy the continuous changing present of slavery, unresolved unfolding of scholars, and researchers continue to be concerned by the endurance of anti-black. The ongoing problem of black exclusion rests from the realm of the human wake work. Forms do not seem to explain this exclusion of assimilation, inclusion, or rights of slavery persists in the political life of Americans, not because of an obsession with black gun, it's because black lives are impermanent to value by political arithmetic. In transcendent of the afterlife of slavery, skewed life change, limit access to health, incarceration, and impoverished of black people. In the United States, weaponized sidewalks, those imagine this as vectors of disease, danger, disaster that hetero weaponized black bodies is black life in the wake of bodies to which anything and everything is done. White liberal imagination trying to feel temporarily bad. There is no mode of empathy can replicate that. Knowing that you are a black person can be killed for living while black to be in the wake is to recognize the way that we are constituted their vulnerability. The legal system cannot be theorized as anything except a tool of social control mired in the white supremacist notion of subjugation. It is not something that is ethical or exists in the abstract. There is no legitimacy. Empirics prove. Butler 13. The rate of incarceration among black males was astronomical. Those black males do not have the degrees of being incarcerated at some point. High school dropouts are more likely to be imprisoned than employed. That mass incarceration system of social control, rapid control. The discourse of rights is less fuel social change. Legal rights are indeterminate and incoherent. Rights discourse on to mystifies people how law really works. The discourse right reflects a kind of isolated individualism. Rights discourse can actually impede progressive movement for genuine justice. Laws not fix the Durban system. A huge unruly miscellany of various multifaceted and contradictory practices. Vote negative to affirmative process of wake work. This allows us to remember the violence of Middle Passage, understand how the violence repeats itself in the present, and provide a praxis for resistance in this place in terms of education. Sharp and 16. To attend to the dead means work hard, emotional, physical, intellectual, or have to work very hard to think, thinking about thinking through slavery and its afterlife. Black scholars get waging the partial truth trying to make sense of their absence and the modes of experience and methods of readily available social first in position that run counter to what we know. We are expected to discard those ways of knowing and interact epistemic violence against others and ourselves. Black academics need to produce legible walking means adhering to research methods, drafting the service of destructive force modes, become undisciplined new modes of methods and research, and who's entering, leaving the archives later, and doing the racial calculus and encourage centuries ago. The kind of black knowledge that kind of method that comes from observing where one stands relative to the door and nurturing and practicing phenomena that disturb the devastating effects of life. People's need never protect the ways we resist, rupture, and disrupt aesthetically materially. Next up. Framework determine the best educational practices for people of color. Farley, if education standards such slavery as one becomes conscious and examines society, the purpose of education is to create the ability to look at the world. I would try to teach that those agonies by which they are surrounded are criminal. Those things are a result of criminal conspiracy. The leaders of revolution ate the forbidden fruit of abolition is with the education that the study begins. Additionally, first name round privilege comes first. Use prioritizing impacts you can control with your ballot, which means fighting in round instantiation of anti-blackness is a prior question. Second, hold them accountable for their ordering of the world. Their perpetuation of anti-blackness should lose them the debate. Yancey 4. Whiteness becomes signify the virtue itself, the process of white world making, construction of world with values and policy that provides supportive structures to whiteness the power to create and elaborate social subterfuge using both whites and non-whites to believe the representation naturally given the epistemological framework of whiteness constructed black people is inferior through regimes of white racist discourse. Whiteness creates a sort of black body through the use of theories and practices that redefine and define certain conceptions. Black internalized white ways of constructing the world understood as ontologically inferior. Hegemony of white ways and knowing white ways of being that name to act include together the case. Underview. Extend that CX checks prevents abuse. That means one AR theory must be CX checked. Here the roles evidences presumes the framework is legitimate, also presumes the government is legitimate. If I win, the government is illegitimate, then there's no way it can be retributive or proportionally punish anyone for crime. There are far evidence. First is the liberalism decided places hope in how liberalism would actually function to increase progress, but that presumes liberalism is good in the first place. It's missing an internal link. Second, there's the hope disadvantage. We are always told to place our faith in hope or to get better education through content systems or some sort of mode of white subjectivity, but that has never worked for the past few hundred years. Wake work is a new mode of educational thinking that allows us to create new practices praxis, which is the better, which better in terms of the alternative third. Afro-pessimism definitely disproves as far as in terms of racial progress with Kantianism, in terms of contingent racism, but obviously the ontology claims disagree with this. Your wood evidence about abstract universal norms is all the links to the critique are about epistemology and the way your framework actually functions, not misapplications of your framework. It's not just Kant was a racist. That's not as simple as the one I see. It's not just like your abstract, but rather specific ways about how you form knowledge and the way you construct the straight. Now, truth testing. On the constitutivism, I'll read a schmagency objection on the framework that takes us out later, but independently to that debate, the constitutive rule of debate is to just vote for the better debater, which means if I convince you to vote for me on the Afro-pessimism critique, I have just sort of one that you should vote for me. There's no reason as to why you're always held to truth testing. Your education argument, when was the last truth testing debate you had that ended up being educational? Martin, you and I had one round 6 that was absurd. There's no reason as to why educational. Also, your education independently excludes the critique, because what would happen if I read this critique and the truth testing rule of valid 1? It would not matter. Wake work would not matter in this space if you win the truth testing argument. Your ground argument, fairness will impact your fairness is a link to the criticism. That's to say that you should be structurally advantaged or structurally have the debate that you want to have on the grounds that you want to have in the terms of education that you want to have is the link to the criticism about not being able to produce new modes of subjectivity through people of color and the way they think about things and how Black lives is structured through the way. Now, the framework. As an overview, there's no intent for side distinction. 8-point governments have unique responsibility to consider consequences. Enoch 7 in policy-making decisions. The global perspective must be undertaken. Perhaps the individual doctrines entitled given a scarcer without thinking about tomorrow. When a state tries to formulate the allocation of scarcer going to have been intended for a distinction. States have no special relationship pursuits and personal interests. Autonomous others read a restricted responsibility. States B point. If we foresee a consequence, then it becomes part of our deliberation, which makes it intrinsic to our action since we intend it to happen. Now, there's also no act to omission distinction. 8 point. We're responsible for intentional omissions because we actively choose not to act. We intend to act upon omissions. B point. States are responsible for everything the public is responsible to all 5. And like individuals, governments always face choice between third parties and authorized private action. However, you can the distinction between authorized and unauthorized action, and it becomes pure when the government formally forbids private action but does not fully discourage it. As an overview to the framework, you're missing a huge portion of it. They miss the justification for why the state is the arbiter of punishment and does not have a history. They just say punishment should just be retributive, but they haven't justified the omnilateral world, why the state is a just retributive punishment, which is all of their contention cards presume, which is A, the link to critique, and B, a reason that's why the affirmative framework just doesn't matter. Now, your course got written about extremes of good. Just because we as people find good in objects and objects are only good because of us does not mean that we are the source of all value or that we are unconditionally the source of all value. Just because things are good because of us doesn't justify us always being good. Now, there's second, that answers all your collapsing, the collapse and necessity arguments. Also, those are very underworted, which means you place a high threshold for explanation. Your second argument about practical identity, agency, objection, agency is not binding. Enoch 11. Agents need not care about qualifications. Agents would, of course, replace the agent who asks, why should I care what? Otherwise, you wouldn't even count as agent. This kept disregard this with a simple, so what? The status of being constitutive agency does not suffice for an arbitrary status. Now, as their last con card about Kant escaping this, it presumes that it's true in the first place, even or because it's just a generic line in Kant's book, where he's just like, well, if all of this is true, then we wouldn't be able to escape it. But it's not a justification. It's just a rhetorically powerful line that doesn't make any sense. Now, the sort of retributivism arguments. First is this is the biggest link to the critique. To say that the United States federal government should retributively punish people justifies mass incarceration because currently there are laws that say people should go to jail for things like drugs that are used to criminalize people of color, and those people are given mandatory minimums. But all of this thing is part of the state's law, which means it is part of the rightful condition of the omnilateral rule, and it is proportional to the crime, which means under the framework of punishing people through the state or through the criminal justice system that link themselves to the creed and the thesis of Afro-pessimism, and independently the go to contention. Freedom mandates pleas and links back to their framework, hold them to cross-sex only the principal matters, so the empirical reality plea should be irrelevant underneath their framework. Easterbrook 69. Everyday people choose often they choose in ignorance. How bizarre for legal system for between the person people of color have jail for 20 years following their 18 oversight denied them the right to compromise. Plea bargaining just 5 price. So established was just one of the perennial attacks on plea bargaining sentences. Norm cut it. Norm independently this outweighs all of your offense. Since you read a universalizable framework, you have to prove that every instance of plea bargaining violates the rightful condition, which means if I prove one instance doesn't, then you would negate it.
Can you resend this off? Sorry.
Oh, this one's already marked actually. It's right there. And then
Press. Can you explain the link to the critique?
the link to the what?
Critique.
There's a couple. The first one is the sort of general starting point of the affirmative framework, theorizing things in a way that takes account the agent, human rights, etc. The first piece of sharp evidence indicates that all of those things are shaped by slavery. Rather, the alternative provides an educational praxis that starts at the base level of what people
Wait, so what's the link specific to the framework?
Huh?
What's the link specific to the framework?
The retributivism link. Retributivism is probably bad. It's resulted in mass incarceration. There was a whole LD topic about that. It is also a reason as to why the state should be able to punish people for weed, which is not good and very anti-black.
Okay. What is wake work?
Wake work is an educational praxis that allows us to analyze the way the violence of the Middle Passage sort of repeats itself in the present, the connections between historical instances of violence, the way that influences our epistemology. Well, in terms of educational praxis, it is probably better than the affirmative. I think the affirmative perpetuates anti-blackness or anti-black norms, and that's an independent reason you should lose. But in terms of solving stuff, it provides new modes of finding. It provides new modes of finding knowledge.
Why does it perpetuate anti-black norms?
That was the link argument to retributivism. It is incredibly messed up to say that the state has the rightful condition to punish proportionally.
Wait, does this say that the state is bad?
Well, that is one of the claims, yes, but if you read a state good claim, I will still go for other claims about your framework.
Okay, wait, so were those the only 2 links?
The link to your epistemology, the link to retributivism, the link to legal normativity, which was the Butler evidence.
What is legal normativity?
Attempting to theorize the legal system in any way that sort of presumes an abstract ethical sort of way it operates, i.e. the legal system is or ought to be this thing that is always consistent with retributivism or always consistent with these principles. The legal system is not one of those things. It is not principled. It is an unruly, the card says it's an unruly miscellany of various nonsense and rights violations and
Can you explain the framing arguments?
Yeah.
How do I link into the framing?
Well, that would be the K.
No, but
case arguments.
What sorts of arguments link into best education for people of color?
I think Wake work does. I think if you win that you are a good educational praxis, if your affirmative has not perpetuated anti-blackness, you would meet this argument that you are not a bad educational model.
Okay. What's the bright line?
That's not an argument. For example, I know what red is and I know what orange is.
Okay.
I do not know the exact shade at which orange becomes red.
Can you explain the in-round privilege arguments?
Yeah, sure. So nothing really extends too much out of this round except what we do in here, which means the ballot should probably, as a top level, prioritize privilege and whiteness first, as in terms of rejecting it, because it is something that
Wait, what
we
does
can
that mean? Does that
directly
mean you should just reject me on face?
Well, no, it's not like an implicit automatic. Well, they might conclude that, but in terms of the actual links I'm going for, it's a lot more nuanced about the way you actually justify your app.
Okay, can you explain the Yancey evidence?
I'm starting to prep. The Yancey evidence talks about world ordering. It claims that white people have done world making, i.e. they've theorized about how the world exists, i.e. when Europeans drew random lines in India and Africa. That white world making must be rejected in favor of, I guess, probably wake work, because it's a way of finding new educational strategies and epistemologies in order to construct the world in a way that is more conducive to what it actually is as opposed to your theorization of it. I'm gonna get water. Do you need some? No water.
I have 135. I'll fill it up. The order is going to be case, critique. Or actually, I'll take another second to try. Okay, I have 127. The order is going to be case, top down, then it'll be framing on the K and then K.
Case
By,
top
by,
down.
by framing on the K, you mean the second sheet of paper?
Yeah.
Okay. So the app case starting where?
Top down.
Framing. Okay.
Sending it off.
Yeah, no problem.
Try to reconnect to the lab.
The trivia thing?
Yeah.
But they're so hard.
Hundreds of thousands of people log on every day at 9 Eastern time. It's like 12 questions if you miss one word. And then $2,000 gets 5 billion words. It's awesome. Trivia set number 1. You're really good.
Alright, is everyone ready? Alright.
The problem is that Ishan fundamentally misunderstands the implication of the confirm. He doesn't actually understand what it means insofar as the amount of the links actually apply. Extending course guard one evidence says that whenever we take an action, we presuppose the object of that action to be that means that we have to understand value humanity. He just says that we doesn't mean we have to. He just says that we don't mean we have to always value ourselves as good, but obviously it does because otherwise these claims to be escapable. That's a necessity argument. He's completely conceded that my firm is inherent to the what he said ends to begin with because ethics must be necessary, not contingent. Any sort of rendering of humanity as not good or immediately rendered contingent. It also means that it's also going to be a prior question to the role of the ballot because it implicates how we actually form meta-ethical obligations rather than just impact justified frameworks. And actually, the court guard two evidence is going to be a big issue in this round. Extend that practical identities are always going to come after our human identities. Here is this agency objection, but obviously our status is just some sort of fluctuating practical identity. It doesn't actually presuppose our understanding of human agents insofar as it also takes out his role about framework because it means that context is always going to be a prior question insofar as how we evaluate actions as agents rather than just our roles as educators or practical identities. Next, extend the contour evidence that says that punishment can never be justified on higher ends than I had because that would treat people individuals as a means to an end. It has to be justified within the crime itself. He says that there's a missing link in my framework. Obviously, I'm defending Kant's moral philosophy to be not the omnilateral will is justified is implicated within his moral philosophy. He says that it's a link to critique, but obviously the way it's applied now is it's not actually an ideal application. Also, he reads intent for distinction and no act omission distinction, but he's conceded that intentions are irrelevant to the AC and consequences are irrelevant to the AC. Insofar as these are cold drop, you shouldn't actually value them. Now go to the truth testing arguments. Extend the branch one evidence. He says that the position of role validity is just to vote for the better debater. Insofar as he's conceded way too many reasons other reasons for factors that are constitutive to LD, like the idea that the the resolution has to you have to prove the affirmative true and the negative. He concedes that this is completely unique to LDN as opposed to things like Parley. Next, he branch to evidence that says that truth testing allows for a wider scope of education to begin with. He says that these education will be worse, but obviously you can still prove that that the resolution is bad. There's no obligation to do it with the critique insofar as the truth testing is still the method to use in this round. I go to the often extending Lippy through evidence that's extending Lippy through evidence is completely conceded. That says that plurilingual just make punishment condition on arbitrary factors. Like the skill of a prosecutor, which impacts the framework. He just reads the Easter book evidence and says that it implicates freedom, but about universalizability. All the matter is not necessarily about universalizability. It's specifically about the implications of retributive justice, which his term doesn't apply because weighing arguments don't also apply. Now go to the framework arguments. His framework arguments. 8 points out this is completely impact justified. It doesn't actually metaethically derive any sort of reason for why we should look at the best education for people of color. Just arbitrarily just exclude a bunch of impacts. You should have a really high threshold. You should have a really high threshold for this role of the ballot. Also, you can't form obligation to tell us to do random things. All these in-round privilege arguments. 8 points out this should just skew the debate. So in ways that I would never control people with that comments or prior question because insofar as he can see all of the practical insofar as he can see all the practical identity. All the practical identity arguments that implicate our human identity before now going to the critique. Off the first one, he said that the problem is that he's conceded the wood evidence at the ball in the underview of the case that talks about why abstract universal norms are never. He just says that about how you form knowledge. That means that it would always frame the case, which would mean that theorizing a legal system in this way would be inevitable. Also justifies the permutation, which is fundamentally inevitable.
Okay. 4 minutes starting now. Right. I want you to slowly, in little words, because I don't get it, explain this Forest Guard 1 extrinsic good argument.
First Forest Guard evidence?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. It says that whenever an agent takes an action, they presuppose the object of that action to be good. And
So they presuppose the reason they're taking the action to be good?
No, like the end of that action.
Okay, and why does that mean okay.
And that means that there has to be some sort of condition there has
to be some sort of unconditional good there.
Yeah, it's sort of the sufficient condition of that goodness.
What do you mean by ethics must be necessary, not contingent?
Ethics have to be binding because otherwise, ethical obligations would not be, or like you would not have to follow them. They would be escapable.
Okay.
Like there wouldn't
That's
actually be an
helpful.
obligation to do certain things.
Alright.
It just means obligations wouldn't be binding.
Okay.
If you were
The critique. The framing page. Truth testing at framework. Alright. Is everybody good to go? The thesis of the critique was conceded the foundational antagonism of white civil society, beginning the hold of the slave trade of the middle passage rebels forward throughout time, accumulating violence. 3 points for ontology. First is natal alienation. Black people are marked at birth to be dead by the system of whiteness, which will never ever treat them with any sort of respect or any sort of human. The second argument is the second argument is the gratuitous violence argument. The violence that started at the space of the middle passage sort of forwards throughout time, implicating the way violence works right now. Emmett Till became Philando Castile. Countless names are structured by the same sort of whiteness that causes these deaths that causes these deaths in the first place. There are 4 link arguments. First is the humanism link. That was the sharp one evidence that says that the realm of the human is always going to exclude people of color and black people because it is constructed for their exclusion, is shaped by white epistemologies. Their attempted inclusion through their wood evidence and their practical identity arguments is impacted by the sharp evidence that says that we do not form wake work in the terms of inclusion, human rights, etc. It is a dissent to the sort of coalition building arguments. The second link is the retributivism link. This was the link that was probably the worst handled by the one era because it literally says it's not bad right now. It'll get better. That is the thesis of the criticism. To say that the state has some sort of ethical referendum on what can be and cannot be punished would say that the people rotting right now in the prison industrial complex is a good thing because the state has the rightful condition to solve it. The framework is incredibly messed up, and so is the justification for their condition. The anti-blackness at the heart of the 1AC cannot be voted for in this round. Third is the state link. That was just sort of the general ontology arguments made above. That was conceded. It does not have any game on the ontology or any evidence on the ontology debate, nor any evidence on it, or nor any reason as to why progress is possible, which means that these thesis claims on the critique were conceded, and you should filter every single argument, framework argument he goes for, and the one through this humanism link argument, the ontology argument about civil society, and the state link argument. The last link is this hope dissent that was dropped on response to the far evidence in the underview that says the sort of idea of reform or doing better or creating better retributivism creates enacts cruel optimism and psychological violence as it constantly gives us hope and takes it away. That is all. Those are four basically conceded link arguments. Now the alternative is wake work. Wake work allows the creation of new modes of finding knowledge. Black scholarship in the status quo is forced into white disciplines of epistemology, reason, practical identity. The way the negative tries to limit, the way the affirmative tries to limit the negative in this debate. Like, you can theorize about people of color all you want, but you gotta do it through David Branson truth testing. That sort of argumentation or white modes of subjectivity that control the way we form education is whiteness and is the link to the criticism which creates co-option of papers over anti-blackness. Black people are expected to discard what they know to be true about the world, i.e. that my framework is impact justified. That is the whole link to the criticism, that people know that this racism exists. People know that retributism is not a thing, but it is impact justified. It should be rejected. It is not warranted enough for white people. They were disciplined into thinking one way in one linear method. Rather, we must reject those methods of thinking in favor of working in the wake of slavery and analyzing how that violence functions. Your one argument on the criticism is I conceded the Wood argument. No, you conceded a response to Wood in the underview that says it is not about the misuse of your theory, but rather the way your theory is formed in the first place in white modes of subjectivity, which all the link work done above. It is not just Kant was a racist or some people misuse Kant, but rather exactly how retributism functions within the ethicality of the United States federal government, which is an answer to what evidence. That also takes out the permutation. It was one word. You should not vote on a permutation like this. First, all links are disadvantages. All links are disadvantages because that was all the work done above, but the affirmative is anti-black. You're not included in terms of creating new modes of education outside of white structures. Second, if the affirmative is a white structure of thinking, you cannot include it in terms of the alternative, which is in terms of educational praxis, not just the generic burn it down stuff. The last argument is they don't get a permutation of method B, which I went on the framing page on the Farley evidence. Let's go there now. Your argument is that it's impact justified. I've already explained why this argument is pretty messed up on the anti-blackness page, but I'll also answer it here. So what that it's impact justified? We all know that racism is bad, and that's sort of a gut check, sort of the sort of framing issue that you as a judge should frame in this round. Even if it is a little impact justified, even if it doesn't have the A, B, and C point of a practical reason justification, you know that the affirmative perpetuated anti-blackness, and that should frame your decision as an ethical decision maker in this space. Your privilege argument, you say I try to skew you. That is the definition of in-round privilege as a white debater, saying that an anti-blackness case that was one-off and unconditional is somehow skewing the affirmative because the affirmative was racist in the first place. The Yancey evidence was also conceded. The white world ordering of the affirmative has to be rejected in every instance as we find new ways to order the world, which was all the epistemology arguments made on the criticism page, which means if Yancey is conceded, you should filter all the way through that. The interview, the truth testing stuff. You go for constitutivism, you basically conceded a agency objection on the affirmative framework, which takes us out. The judge has no constitutive rule. They just decide who wins and who loses, which is the reason that's why if I win any of the framework arguments and convince them to vote for me, then I've convinced them to vote for me. That's as simple as that. Your education arguments, you say there's better education and I can prove an obligation first. That is absolute BS. You would exclude the Wakework with your better education in terms of truth testing and just go for your preclusion argument. Second is a turn. If I win that the state links or any of the ontology claims, then it proves that the state doesn't have an obligation, which means if they go for truth testing, then there's no obligation, and especially if their framework is missing the part that actually justifies the state doing stuff. There's no education they've specified as to what they get under truth testing, but I've specified as to what they exclude under truth testing, which is this argument about educational praxis and wake work. Now, the framework. You go for this object of our action argument just because we think whatever we're doing something for is a good idea does not make that unconditionally a good idea. That is absurd and a fallacy. Just because I think that going for this critique is a good idea to me does not unconditionally mean that white people or white civil society is valuable. That argument is just not explained very well in the one here. Your necessity argument is not true, especially if your framework is false independently. If your necessity argument is true, ethics must be binding, then you've really messed up on the agency objection, which just says that people can literally just ignore the affirmative framework. Let's go there. You extend this practical identity argument, and you say agency doesn't presuppose the fact that we're always agents. Even if we're always agents, i.e., in terms of the warrant of your framework, agency says we don't have to care, which is the point of the bindingness argument that you extended. The Enoch evidence is pretty clear. Even if we're all agents, we can all just say so what, which means it's never binding. The retributivism answer on the last framework, it's Kant's moral philosophy, etc., and it's not ideal right now. This is the link to the critique on the Hope said that was articulated on the anti-blackness page. Your last argument is that I've conceded no consequentialism and stuff, but you didn't warrant this in the last speech. That's not a reason to strike to implicate to take out any of my offense. You've clearly won that the affirmative is anti-black in 4 places, and that's a clear reason to vote negative.
Alright, I have 1.7. The order is going to be case, critique.
Any particular place on the case?
Probably.
Okay.
Or the framework page at all?
Yeah, probably just like in cross apps.
Okay.
Is everyone ready?
problem is that you still mishandled a bunch of arguments on the framework to be. The first argument is the first court evidence that says that whenever we take an action, we presuppose the object of that action to be good, and so far as that means that literally, that means that an agent is literally just someone that can set an end, which means that it's not an excluder, it's not a concept that excludes anyone from the case. You can concede this throughout the entirety of the round. Also, your only response is once against that just making an action doesn't mean that the end would be unconditionally good, but obviously you can still set some sort of personal good, but it still needs to have some sort of unconditional goodness, which would be humanity to begin with. You try to extend the schmagency of the practical identity argument. The problem is that you conceded the fundamental argument that says that we care, that says that even if you think you can say so what, that's just an idea that being a schmagen doesn't comes from the practical identity level. Obviously, on the human identity level, you conceded that it must be necessary for ethics to it must be necessary for ethics to be inescapable. Insofar as that means that you have to value humanity unconditionally as a coming before practical identities. This is going to be a big implication. It's going to be a big implication in the framing of the entirety of the round, because it means that our content conception of agency is always going to come as a prior question to all of the roles as an educator that all of the roles as an educator that he's before in the framing of the round. And insofar as I literally have 100% strength of the debate, because you can extend the Libby 3 evidence about how plea bargaining render is contingent based on prosecutorial skill, and you can easily vote there. He's also completely misunderstood all the arguments about retributivism. He just says that it's he just thinks that I'm saying that'll just get worse now. But obviously, I'm just talking about how it's an ideal application of the state doesn't actually apply things retributively to begin with. Now, go to the truth testing arguments. He just tries to go for these. Education arguments. How the education will be worse. But the problem is that it's conceded that truth testing independently allows for a wider range of arguments that he can still prove that there's no moral obligation with the critique. He goes friend to a meta-ethical obligation that's also going to be a solvency after the AC, because he's conceded the necessity argument under the first court guard evidence that says that his framework is not meta-ethically justified insofar as that means that that is epistemically incorrect. Even if he's winning all of his arguments for why impact for why my argument about impact justification is so what, or it's really fucked up. It still just proves that we will never actually be able to know which way to frame the round, because it'll be completely irresolvable insofar as we don't actually know what the judge should do. So far, we don't actually know what the judge should do now. Now go to the critique, extending what evidence. He just keeps saying that his response says that it's not about the misuse of the framework, it's about how the K functions, regardless of how it functions. He's conceded that it is an inevitable concept in and of itself. Insofar as that means I still get access to these triad framework, and you have to look to the critique, you have to look to the critique to the lens of abstract inevitability, which means that all of his, this round really breaks down easily because the first place you can vote on is the con framework, and the offense conceded insofar as the K is still filtered through a lens of abstract ethics that he critiques.